Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Welcome to what is sure to be an unforgettable episode today on my podcast. You are going to be moved by the story of my guest and the focus of his life's work based on the trauma he experienced shortly after high school. His name is Marcus Engel. And Marcus, I'd like to welcome you to my show.
Thank you for having me on, Meredith. It's been a pleasure getting to know you virtually over the last couple of weeks or months, and looking forward to the episode.
So am I. And of course, I must give a shout out to my good friend and colleague who introduced us, Dr. Nate Regier. And, I have to tell you, Marcus, I don't know if you were aware that Nate contacted me after he had heard you speak at a conference and said, Meredith, this is somebody you will love having on your show. And of course, he never steers me wrong, and he was absolutely right. So I'm just so looking forward to this conversation. It's going to be an important one for every one of my listeners to really pay attention to and absorb. So let me just tell a little bit of your story, Marcus, as part of your introduction, and then you can fill in what I'm sure will be some gaps. As a college freshman, Marcus Engel was blinded and nearly killed after being struck by a drunk driver. Through hundreds of hours of reconstructive surgery, months of rehab, and adapting to a completely new world, Marcus remained committed to his goals: return to college and recapture life. Marcus has accepted and he embraced the challenge. And the life lessons he learned on this unexpected journey are now the guiding forces that inspire hundreds of thousands every day. He's the co-founder of the I'm Here movement, a 501c3, which is changing the culture of care with two simple words. Marcus has authored 4 books. He holds a BS in sociology and a master's in narrative medicine. And in 2017, Marcus was awarded an honorary doctorate from the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. He's currently an adjunct professor at the University of Notre Dame, where he teaches pre-med students the art of, and I love this, Marcus, being with. He lives in Orlando, Florida with his wife and his seeing eye dog. So Marcus, please fill in some of the details that led to the work you're doing today with the I'm Here movement.
Wow. So the trauma that started all of this off, as you said, was just after high school. I was 18 years old. I was 6 weeks into my freshman year of college at Missouri State University, and came home for the weekend and didn't go back to college after the weekend because I had been laying in an intersection and then laying in an ICU, laying in all kinds of operating rooms. And that's what continued for the next year or two was the trauma, and then the rehabilitation and recovery after trauma. And I think that so often people who have gone through something devastating or life-changing or life rearranging, I feel like so many people who have experienced something like that, they know true suffering, and they don't want anyone else to suffer like that. And so often people who have gone through negative experiences, one of the things that we want to do is to create some good out of that negative experience. And I believe that's what drove me from an early age to just really realize that life is a gift, and try to keep on living this life that you have even though sight is now gone, reconstructive facial surgery, disfigurement, all those kind of things. But life goes on, and I wanted to pass along the lessons that I received as a patient to hopefully change care at the other end of the stethoscope for patients just like me. I wanted to help the nurses and the docs and the PTs and OTs. I wanted them to have some vocabulary and some perspective and hopefully learn from that so that their patients could receive just the best, most compassionate care possible.
So powerful. And, a lot of my listeners, Marcus, are not in healthcare, yet there are so many things that came out as part of the care you received that are applicable to them in their everyday work, interacting with coworkers, anyone inside their organization, as well as even with their families. And I would love for you to talk about some of those experiences that you had in the hospital where you felt the caring of someone else and the impact that that had on you.
Yeah, so the story that I reflect on and that I teach outside of healthcare too, because it's not healthcare, it's not healthcare specific. This is straight up just humanity. This is human being to human being. The night that they rolled me into the ER, my life was literally kind of hanging by a thread. I had a crike in the street. I was rushed into surgery, massive amount of facial injuries and bodily injuries. And the one thing that I remember once I was in the hospital was a person holding my hand throughout that entire first night. And I could tell that this person who was holding my hand, I could tell that they were female. And every time she could tell that I was conscious and absorbing what she was saying, she would say, Marcus, my name is Jennifer. You're in the hospital. And then she would say what I believe to be the two most compassionate words that most any human being can say to another. And those words are, I'm here. And I didn't know where here was, but I knew that there was another human being there holding my hand, present with me, attentive to me in that time of suffering. So how do we bring this into leadership and business and social life, et cetera? What I get to teach my pre-meds at Notre Dame is this is what we get to do, right? We get to be that comforting presence when another person is suffering. And if you're in business, you know that so oftentimes the customer is the one who is suffering. So how can we be present for them? How do we acknowledge their pain? And whether that's a physical pain like it was going on for me, or it's a customer needs a return policy, I think we can all identify with the time that someone has been there for us or we've been there for them. And so that's just really what I try to get people to realize is that being aware of the suffering of others and then being present for it. That is what humanity is, right? That's what we
Mm-hmm.
do as human beings.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So when you talk about being here, I'm here, or as you also mentioned, with your pre-med students, the being with, what does that look like and sound like when we're really here for someone?
I think we know uh, when someone is truly with us in this moment, right? For one thing, they're not typing on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
Last night we had a surgeon as a guest speaker in class who talked about one of the biggest things these days is to simply make eye contact with a patient, because so often patients are on their phone or looking up what the doctor said or texting their mom what they're talking about with the doctor. And it really comes down to, can we be attentive in this moment to another person's suffering? Can we step inside their shoes? And I think once we can put those distractions out of our way, and we can be open to the suffering of others, that's when we get to step in and be our best as human beings.
Mm. And let's talk about compassion, because I know I've seen you mention a compassionate or compassion expert. So how do you define compassion, first of all? And what is a compassion expert?
Boy, I'm not sure I love that title, because I'm not always the most compassionate person in the world, right? I'm not Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa. I am not doing the work out on the streets, taking care of other people. I am doing what I do, spreading the word about how do we show up for people. So so a compassion expert, I'm not really sure I'm the most compassionate person in the world, but what I have done has been able to study human interaction through my background in sociology. And then the master's in narrative medicine that I got from Columbia University about 10 years ago now. What we do in narrative med is we take the stories of healthcare and then we try to turn those stories into something that we can learn from. And so my work now, in addition to sharing my story and my experiences, is taking that narrative medicine knowledge into teaching writing to clinicians. And this, again, is not exclusive to healthcare, because there's so much positive effect when we use journaling and writing as a therapeutic resource. When we put pen to paper or digits to keyboard, and we begin to write, that's whenever we can start to sort out some of these very complicated things in our mind, our traumas from the past. And that's where healing and coping also lie. So I was trained in that work, and somehow I ended up with this adjunct professorship at Notre Dame, where I get to remind students that the greatest things that we can do are give another person our presence and then use those words. I'm here.
Mm-mm. I know you had other individuals throughout your hospital stay, surgeries, and the rehab afterwards. What are some other points of experience that you might share about people who were really present with you or really touched you and had a positive impact? Because I want to impress on my listeners and for myself the reminder of all the little ways that we can make a difference in someone's life in a simple moment of humanity, as you said.
Yeah. So I reflect. I have to reflect immediately to a point of humanity when one of my nurses asked me the question, "Do you want me to call you Marcus or Mark?" And even though she was taking care of a patient who was blind and mute and immobile and disfigured, she took the time and was enough in the moment, attentive enough to say, I wonder what he'd rather have me call him. He's 18 years old. He probably doesn't want to be called Mr. Engel, right? As a teenager. But should I call him Marcus or Mark? And that simple gesture of acknowledging my personhood, right? Not just me as a patient on our patient load, but that's who I am as an individual with preferences and passions. And so I think just simply again, taking a moment to find out who is this person really, and maybe it's through asking, "Hey, what do you want me to call you? What do your friends call you?" Those kind of simple gestures surrounding, especially our name and identity. I think that that's a really great way to show people that we are present in the moment with them. We're listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a wonderful example. Just a small thing that we can do that shows the other person, I respect you. I care about what's important to you. And just taking a moment, as I'm thinking about this, there's a calmness and a slowing down in my own thinking that's happening, Marcus, as I think of how to apply being with someone else. And I'm curious because everyone is so busy these days, and in the medical profession, as well as many others, we're on these tight time schedules. So, what do you suggest for people that just feel like I don't have time to slow down and do this in
Mm,
addition to everything else that's on my plate? How would you
right.
respond to that?
You don't have time to be kind. It doesn't take any more time to be kind than it does to be rude, right? It doesn't take any more time to be kind than it does to be disengaged, right? A smile doesn't take any more time. Taking an extra breath before responding to a complaint or a grievance doesn't take any more time. I find that like our human illusions of time sometimes can be kind of off too. And I point to a bit of research that showed that if a doctor spent a certain amount of time with a patient, that patient might perceive that amount of time to be different, whether the doctor was sitting or standing. And if the
Mm,
doctor would sit down, the patient believed, I think on average, roughly that the doctor spent twice as much time with them as they actually did. So, what do you think doctors do to show compassion and to show that they're listening and there? A lot of times you'll find them sitting down based on that evidence.
hmm. That's such a simple uh, gesture to think of. When we look at applying that in the workplace, Marcus, what are some other things that leaders can do or individuals can do to convey to someone else that I care about you, either in their words or in their behavior?
I believe that it starts with an awareness and acknowledgement of each person's individuality. Each person's a human being like no one else, right? And so when we take that time to stop and think about everyone else being a human being and how we can uh, best empathize with those individuals, a lot of people may think, oh, well, you work in healthcare, you work with nurses. Well, this is kind of specific to a quote unquote caring profession like nurses. No, I believe it was General Stanley McChrystal who said empathy is the greatest trait a leader can have. And so, if that's applicable in the caring sciences as well as the Department of Defense, I think that it shows that it's applicable across every range of business and society, right? We all have
Mhm,
the opportunity to slow down, look at other human beings as individuals, and to try to just empathize with that way of what might that person be experiencing, and can I do something that is kind in response to whatever they're going through, or do I become disengaged and purposefully turn away from that suffering? It's a
mhm,
question to ask, and I always want to turn to the point of compassion, to the point of being human to another person.
mhm. So important. And yet we get preoccupied with ourselves and what's going on within us to really give that kind of undivided attention to someone else is a habit that has to be, I think, developed. Would you agree
Yes.
with that? It's
Yes,
not something we
absolutely.
automatically know.
Yeah, I think as human beings, a lot of times we start to turn very much inward, and when we start looking too far inward, it's all we can see, right? But if we start
Mhm.
looking outward, that's whenever we can look around and see other human beings. When we're too focused on ourselves, our own identity, our own struggles, it's you know where that leads, and it leads to
Mhm.
depression and anxiety, etc. But whenever we are outwardly focused, that leads to a lot more fulfillment. You know, I when I was in college, I spent 3 summers working at a church camp where I grew up attending when I was a kid. And I was, of course, 21 years old, just having suffered through blindness, etc. And I quickly learned that summer that those kids didn't care about my blindness. They wanted to know that if there was an emergency, there was an adult around that they could turn to. And that I learned is such an antidote to some of that inward thinking, is to go outward. I often say, if you're experiencing some type of uh, emotional difficulties, go work with kids, because they don't care about your hangups. They don't care about how you feel about yourself or your identity or what your struggles are from your childhood. They want to know that there's an adult around. And when you're in that position of leadership, it's something that starts to make you look a little more outward instead of inward.
I was just thinking about what you went through yourself at age 18 to have this traumatic experience of blindness, of disfigurement, of so many surgeries to try to adjust everything that had been broken or moved. And I'm just curious, what was your own journey like to get to a place where you could be the person you are being today? I can imagine at 18, when you were in the hospital, you weren't as compassionate and concerned and outwardly turning as you are now, simply because of your condition.
Well, my journey, just like everybody else's journey, is ongoing until the day you die, right?
Mhm.
So I would say, even now, what, 3 decades later, there's still things that I'm adjusting to. I think that kind of goes along with major trauma, whether that be physical trauma, sexual trauma, emotional trauma. I think that there is a lifelong awareness of these things. So how did I go from angry young man, 18-year-old, newly blind, etc.? Well, it wasn't always a straight line. You know, sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I would say, though, it was really about 3 years into my vision loss that I spent that first summer out at Camp Moval in Union, Missouri, and really started to see some of the great traits that I had prior to blindness. Those had not gone away. They just
Mhm.
kind of lain dormant for a few years while I was trying to figure out life. And um, that's whenever I realized, okay, this is what we get to do. I get to do this. I get to take those experiences that I've had and try to do something a little more positive with them than the inwardly focused self. Too much focus on the self, I suppose.
Mhm. Well, I think that's something that it can take many decades to realize the benefits of, as you said earlier, the outward focus versus the inward, all about me. And when you work with leaders today and you're talking about being a caring person, what are some of the other points that you make that you think are valuable for us to carry in our own minds, each one of my listeners, that would be helpful just in how they approach others and interact with others, besides what you've shared so far?
Well, I think that one of the things that I try to share with audiences, et cetera, is the story of the day that the surgeons told me that I would never see again, and how I erupted with emotion on them. And I couldn't speak at this time, and I was writing everything out longhand, and I wrote out just terrible things. These doctors told them how much I hated them, how can you even look at yourself in the mirror? How can you call yourself a doctor if you can't fix me? Just all this vitriol, misplaced vitriol, right?
Mm-hmm.
Misplaced. And those doctors simply had the grace enough to say, I'm so sorry. And then they left the room, and my parents got to come then and hold my hands and take care of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until a couple of years later, whenever I really started going into mental health counseling for myself to try to work some of this stuff out, that a counselor said uh, a phrase that many people know, and that is hurting people hurt people, hurting
Mm.
people. And I use that illustration of me and my misplaced anger on these surgeons, and try to get people to understand that, look, when somebody erupts on you, it's not personal necessarily, right? It's not personal. It's their issue. It's not somebody blowing up on you personally. And I think that whenever we can understand that an emotional reaction or response comes from someone who is hurting, hopefully that gives us a little bit more forgiveness, a little bit more kindness, a little bit more compassion, to not react to that in a manner as I've taken a personal affront.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Wow. Let's explore that a bit, because we can all get triggered, right, by things that other people say to us that we take personally. We take offense to those things. And I think what you're bringing up is just such an important point, that this person who is hurling these words at us is actually hurting themselves. Sometimes they're projecting their own frustration with themselves onto us, or frustration with someone else. And so when we're in that moment, do you have some suggestions of how someone can kind of stay detached so they don't take it personally and they don't react and then get into this either argument or shouting match or withdraw? What are some of the best ways you've experienced yourself or helped others experience in terms of responses that work for both parties?
Take a breath, take a
Mm.
breath, respond, don't react. Respond, don't react. And, if you want to take it a step further, maybe respirate, respond, don't react. Take a breath, and try to hold those things in really quick. That this person is probably just hurting, and whenever we do that, we can have a more compassionate response. Which maybe you need to. So often, I think it's they're suffering. People are just scared, right? People are just scared, and sometimes they need reassurance. But whether it's a customer, they're scared because they're scared that they spent their money on something and they're not going to be able to get their money back. There's fear there. And so I believe that remembering that hurting people hurt people, and remembering that oftentimes the unloading or the hurling of vitriol, it probably didn't start with you. It probably
Mhm.
didn't start with you. And
Mhm.
it's probably a fear response, right? That they immediately start thinking the worst case scenario. So trying to calm someone by looking them in the eye, kind of crazy for a blind guy to be telling people that, but look them in the eye, you know, and try to listen attentively, acknowledge what the individual is saying, be attentive to what they're saying. And that all boils down to two words, which is active listening. Active
Mhm.
listening. When people feel as though they're heard and that they're being listened to, oftentimes that means that they won't ramp it up, right? They won't escalate it if they feel like they're being heard.
For you, uh, because I've used the term active listening for many years since we focus on teaching people communication skills. I'm curious from your perspective, what does active listening involve? What is required of the listener?
Wow. So this really gets into the narrative medicine master's work that I did. It's the act of witnessing. We talked about, or actually a whole course called witnessing, or giving and receiving accounts of self. And we really looked in depth at what does it mean to share a story? What does it mean to receive a story? And how can we witness something without it emotionally involving us too much? And that's kind of crazy to say, because I'm telling you to turn to compassion and to do something and witness other people's suffering. But we've also got to stay kind of that middle of the road. And whenever we're walking that middle way, that's where we don't get as rattled by the explosions from customers or clients or employees that are angry about XYZ.
Hmm. Yeah, it sounds like being able to somehow stay neutral so that you don't allow the words to determine what your next words are going to be yourself. And it ties back into what you were saying about responding and not reacting. And I think not reacting, I think people get that. We don't just say the first thing that comes to our mind or with the tone of voice we feel like using if we want to be sarcastic or somehow get back. But in your way of thinking, what is a good response? What does that consist of? What does that look like?
I think that starts with I you learn this in counseling too, couples counseling therapy, right? That I hear what you said. I'm acknowledging what you said. I'm going to repeat back what you said in the way that I understand it and ask for any clarification for greater understanding. Uh, that's a lot, right? That's a lot to do in a moment of high emotion and anxiety and fear and taking things personally. That's hard to do. But I think if you can accomplish that, you're you're going to feel a lot better. That customer is going to feel a lot better. It takes things that it takes situations that might be escalating up towards a 10, drops them back down to a 1 or a 2.
Mm-hmm. I would love for you to share. I know you do a lot of speaking, you work with a lot of different healthcare organizations. Do you have an example or two of leaders you've worked with where once they understand the kinds of aspect of compassion, of being here, being present with someone, when they adopt that and make changes, what are you seeing as some of the benefits or results of making those changes?
Well, the first thing that you're going to see is the bosses and the leaders that are engaged with the workforce. Those are the ones that have a much higher retention rate in the workforce, right? If you know that the people in the C-suite are on the floors or in the cubicles or out in the shop, if you know that the leaders are engaged with the individuals doing the work and witnessing what they're doing in the work, that is key. That is key. I think about going to some of the best known hospitals in this country, and and getting to walk around with some leaders, and they know everyone's name. They know everybody's name. And, hey, Charlie, and turned to me and said, Charlie's one of our EVS employees. So he's environmental services. He's not a doctor, right? He's not an administrator, but those really astounding leaders that I've got to meet, they know everybody's name. And when your boss and the leaders know your name, that's a great step as far as just simple engagement.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point. As we're wrapping up here, Marcus, because I could talk to you for such a long time, I want you to know you have this wonderful, soothing voice that just conveys the caring that is a part of your message. So you're in great alignment with your voice and your message. So thank you. I wondered if there's anything else you would like to share with my listeners today that you think might be valuable for them in their interactions with the others at work or at home.
Remember, hurting people hurt people, and be present. Be present in the moment. Don't be distracted. Don't be distracted by all of the other things that tend to distract us out of the moment, worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, thinking about what happened last week, about our own fragile egos. Just be present, stay present. And like I said, I do a lot of work with hospitals and healthcare systems across the country, talking about patient experience and engagement and retention and recruitment. But it's really the same thing in the corporate world. It's everybody needs those reminders to stay present and to be compassionate. Like who wants to be around people who are not compassionate, right? That's not exactly a trait, non-compassion. I'm not sure that's really a term, but non-compassion is usually not a attractive trait. So the more we can really just practice being with our fellow human beings, we're all walking through this life together. None of us gets out unscathed. Suffering is a part of the human experience. Let's just all try to be a little more present for each other. And if I can help any of your listeners with that messaging, please feel free to reach out to me at marcusengel.com. A lot of stuff on YouTube. And my podcast. Can I plug my podcast?
Please. I was just going to ask you to share information about your books, your podcast, anything else you would like to let my listeners know about.
Sure. Well, the podcast is called Compassion and Courage, Conversations in Healthcare. And you can also just search under Marcus Engel if you can't remember Compassion and Courage. And part of that is part of the format of the show is interviews with either survivors like myself, or of docs, of nurses, of anybody really that has any kind of story of compassion, especially as it relates to healthcare. But you don't have to be a healthcare professional to get something out of Compassion and Courage. I think you'll find a lot of great info there. And I've written 4 books, and one of them is called I'm Here, Compassionate Communication in Patient Care. And another is called The Other End of the Stethoscope. Those are the 2 books that are frequently used by lots of nursing schools and allied health profession schools to teach those fundamental pieces of compassionate communication. And I just love that my experiences, traumatic as they were, are now being used to help educate a whole new generation of caregivers. So that's what I get to do. And I'm thankful for this life, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to be on your show and to spread this message.
Well, Marcus, thank you. It's been such a gift for you to be with me today and for me to be with you. And I admire so much what you're accomplishing with your message and the lives, the cultures you're transforming because of your work. The outreach you're doing and the impact you're having is fabulous. So thank you. I honor so much who you are and who you're being in the world. It's wonderful. And I'm grateful to have had you with me today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being with you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free facilitator guide to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.